Lucy Martinez had mastered the art of invisibility long before she turned 25. Not the kind where you disappear from sight, but the more insidious type where you become so perfectly predictable, so reliably pleasant, that people stop seeing the person beneath the performance. As she stood in her childhood kitchen, methodically arranging her mother's prescription bottles in alphabetical order, Lucy's reflection in the window showed a woman who looked exactly like what her family expected: dutiful, selfless, and completely harmless. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Martinez family home, a sprawling two-story house in suburban Phoenix that had witnessed decades of carefully orchestrated dysfunction. Lucy had been awake since 5 a.m., as she had been every day for the past 3 years since moving back home to help with Mom's condition. The official story was that Maria Martinez's early-onset dementia required round-the-clock care, and Lucy, being the unmarried daughter with a flexible work-from-home job in graphic design, was the obvious choice. The real story was far more complicated, but Lucy had learned that the truth was a luxury her family couldn't afford to acknowledge. "Lucy, Mija, did you remember to pick up my blood pressure medication?" Maria's voice drifted from the living room, where she sat in her favorite armchair, watching her morning telenovelas. At 62, Maria Martinez was a woman who had spent her entire life perfecting the delicate balance of appearing fragile enough to require care while maintaining enough authority to control every aspect of her children's lives. Her memory came and went with suspicious convenience, sharp as a blade when it came to perceived slights or unfulfilled obligations, mysteriously foggy when confronted with her own contradictions. "Already organized and ready for you, Mom," Lucy called back, her voice carrying the same gentle, patient tone she'd cultivated over years of practice. She picked up the pill organizer she'd filled the night before, each compartment labeled with days and times in her neat handwriting. This daily ritual had become second nature, just like everything else she did to maintain the carefully constructed peace that kept the Martinez family from completely imploding. The front door slammed with the particular violence that announced her brother Diego's arrival. At 28, Diego was the golden child who could do no wrong, despite a resume that included 2 DUIs, a failed marriage, and a rotating series of get-rich-quick schemes that somehow always required emergency loans from the family. Lucy heard his heavy footsteps in the hallway, followed by the sound of him rummaging through the kitchen cabinets with the entitlement of someone who had never learned that other people's spaces deserved respect. "Where's the good coffee?" Diego demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. His hair was disheveled, and his clothes carried the stale scent of whatever bar he'd closed down the night before. "All I can find is this generic crap." Lucy opened the cabinet above the stove and retrieved the expensive Colombian blend she'd purchased with her own money, as she did every week. "Here you go," she said, handing him the bag with a smile that had been refined through countless similar interactions. "I picked it up yesterday." Diego grunted something that might have been thanks and immediately began making coffee with the aggressive efficiency of someone who expected the world to accommodate his needs. Lucy watched him move through the kitchen, leaving a trail of minor destruction in his wake: cabinet doors left open, coffee grounds scattered across the counter, the sugar bowl moved to the wrong shelf. She would clean it all up later, just as she always did, because maintaining harmony was more important than asserting boundaries that no one would respect anyway. "Diego, is that you, Mijo?" Maria's voice carried a warmth that never quite reached the same temperature when she addressed Lucy. "Come give your mother a kiss." Lucy followed her brother into the living room, where she witnessed the daily performance that had defined their family dynamics for as long as she could remember. Maria's face lit up with genuine joy as Diego leaned down to kiss her cheek, her hands reaching up to touch his face with the tender concern of a mother whose love was as conditional as it was fierce. Lucy had stopped waiting for that same light to appear in her mother's eyes when she entered her room. Disappointment was a luxury she'd learned to live without. "You look tired, Mijo. Are you eating enough?" "Lucy, make your brother some eggs." The command was delivered with the casual authority of someone who had never questioned whether Lucy might have her own plans for the morning. "And call your cousin Sophia. She's been asking about the family dinner this Sunday." The mention of Sophia sent a familiar chill through Lucy's chest, though her expression remained perfectly neutral. Sophia Martinez-Chin, her father's brother's daughter, was everything Lucy had never been allowed to become: successful, married to a doctor, living in a beautiful home in Scottsdale with 2 photogenic children and a social media presence that showcased a life of carefully curated perfection. More importantly, Sophia was the family member everyone turned to when they needed someone reliable, someone trustworthy, someone who could be counted on to do the right thing. The irony was not lost on Lucy that she had spent years actually being that person, only to watch the credit go to someone who showed up for holidays and posted thoughtful comments on Facebook. Of course, Mom. I'll call her after breakfast. Lucy moved toward the kitchen, already mentally preparing the elaborate meal that would somehow transform Diego's hangover into evidence of her caring nature. As she cracked eggs into a bowl, she could hear her brother regaling their mother with stories from his latest business venture, something involving cryptocurrency and a friend who had inside connections. Maria listened with the rapt attention of someone who had never met a bad idea wrapped in masculine confidence that she couldn't enthusiastically support. The eggs sizzled in the pan as Lucy's mind wandered to the conversation she'd overheard 3 weeks ago, the one that had finally crystallized years of careful observation into a plan that made her pulse quicken with anticipation. She had been in the laundry room, folding clothes with her usual invisible efficiency, when Sophia and her mother had started talking in the kitchen. They'd assumed Lucy couldn't hear them, or perhaps they'd simply forgotten she was there, as people so often did. I just think someone needs to keep an eye on the situation, Sophia had said, her voice carrying the concerned authority of someone discussing a problem that required adult intervention. Lucy's been living here for 3 years now, and I'm starting to wonder if she's taking advantage of Tia Maria's condition. She's got that graphic design business, but does anyone actually know how much money she's making? It would be so easy for her to be skimming from Mom's accounts. The words had hit Lucy like a physical blow, not because they were true, but because they revealed the casual cruelty that had always lurked beneath her family's surface. Here was Sophia, who visited maybe once a month and contributed nothing to their mother's actual care, planting seeds of suspicion about the daughter who had sacrificed her independence to become a full-time caregiver. The conversation had continued for another 10 minutes, with Maria expressing concerns about Lucy's antisocial tendencies and wondering if it was healthy for someone her age to be so isolated. Lucy plated Diego's eggs with the same careful attention she brought to everything else, arranging them beside perfectly crispy bacon and toast cut into neat triangles. As she carried the plate to the dining room, she caught her reflection again in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at her appeared exactly the same as she had that morning, and every morning for the past 3 years. But something fundamental had shifted in those overheard 10 minutes, something that had been building pressure like steam in a sealed container, waiting for the right moment to find release. "Here you go," she said, setting the plate in front of Diego with a smile that felt more genuine than it had in months. "I hope you enjoy it." And for the first time in years, Lucy Martinez felt truly excited about what tomorrow might bring. Sunday family dinner arrived with the predictable chaos that had become the Martinez family trademark. Lucy spent the entire morning preparing a feast that would feed 12 people, even though only 8 were expected. The kitchen filled with the aroma of her grandmother's secret recipe for mole, homemade tortillas, and the tres leches cake that everyone would praise while forgetting to ask who had spent 6 hours making it from scratch. By the time the first guests arrived, Lucy had transformed their modest dining room into something worthy of a magazine spread, complete with fresh flowers she'd arranged herself and cloth napkins she'd pressed until they looked professionally laundered. Sophia arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, as she always did, carrying a store-bought salad in a crystal bowl that probably cost more than Lucy's monthly grocery budget. She swept through the front door with the confidence of someone who had never doubted their place in the world, her designer outfit perfectly coordinated, her makeup flawless despite the Arizona heat. Behind her trailed her husband Marcus, a cardiologist who spoke in the measured tones of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room, and their 2 children, Isabella and David, who had inherited their mother's sense of entitlement along with their mother's striking cheekbones. "Lucy, you look tired, Prima. Are you getting enough sleep?" Sophia's greeting came with the kind of air kiss that barely made contact, followed by a concerned expression that Lucy knew was performed entirely for the benefit of the other family members within earshot. "I hope you're not working too hard taking care of Tia Maria. You know, Marcus and I were just talking about how there are wonderful assisted living facilities these days, very high-quality places where she could get professional care." Lucy's smile never wavered, though something dark and satisfying unfurled in her chest at Sophia's predictable opening gambit. "How thoughtful of you to be concerned," she replied, accepting the salad bowl with the same gracious manner she'd perfected over years of similar exchanges. "Mom's actually doing very well at home. The familiar environment really helps with her memory issues. But I'm sure you understand how important it is for family to stick together during difficult times." The subtle emphasis on the word family was lost on Sophia, but Lucy caught the slight tightening around her cousin's eyes that suggested the message had been received. Marcus stepped forward with his usual polished charm, extending a hand toward Lucy with the kind of firm handshake that medical professionals seem to believe conveyed both competence and compassion. "Lucy, you're looking well." Sophia's right though, caregiving can be incredibly demanding. "Have you considered respite care? There are programs that could give you a break without disrupting your mother's routine." His tone carried the authority of someone dispensing medical advice, though Lucy noted that he'd never actually examined their mother or shown any interest in her condition beyond these superficial expressions of concern. Before Lucy could respond, her uncle Roberto arrived with his wife Carmen, followed closely by Diego, who had managed to shower and change into clothes that didn't smell like stale alcohol. The living room filled with the familiar sounds of family gathering, animated conversations in rapid-fire Spanish, children's laughter echoing from the backyard, and the gentle clinking of ice in glasses as Lucy served her famous agua fresca. To any outsider, it would have appeared to be the picture of a close-knit Hispanic family celebrating their bonds over a lovingly prepared meal. Lucy moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, ensuring everyone's glasses stayed full and appetizers remained well-stocked, while simultaneously monitoring the various dishes cooking in the kitchen. She had learned long ago that the key to surviving family gatherings was to stay busy enough that she couldn't be cornered for the uncomfortable conversations that seemed to follow her like shadows. But today felt different. Today, she found herself actually listening to the undercurrents of conversation, cataloging small details and filing away information with the methodical precision of someone preparing for war. "Diego's been telling us about his new cryptocurrency venture," Roberto announced as they gathered around the dining table, his voice carrying the forced enthusiasm of someone trying to sound supportive while harboring serious doubts. "It sounds very innovative." Diego launched into an explanation of blockchain technology that demonstrated a superficial understanding wrapped in the kind of confidence that had always allowed him to convince family members to invest in his schemes. Lucy served the main course while he spoke, noting how Sophia and Marcus exchanged meaningful glances when Diego mentioned needing initial capital from trusted family members. She also observed how her mother nodded along with everything Diego said, despite having complained privately to Lucy just days before about his latest requests for money. "It's wonderful how Diego always thinks outside the box," Sophia commented, her tone suggesting anything but admiration. "Some people are just natural entrepreneurs. Of course, it takes a certain kind of personality to handle that level of risk and uncertainty. Not everyone is cut out for the business world." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, and Lucy felt the familiar weight of unspoken expectations settling on her shoulders. She was supposed to smile and nod, perhaps make some self-deprecating comment about preferring the stability of her quiet design work. Instead, she found herself studying Sophia's face with new intensity, memorizing the exact expression her cousin wore when delivering these carefully crafted insults disguised as observations. "You're absolutely right," Lucy agreed, setting down a perfectly plated serving of mole. "It's important to know your limitations and work within them. Some people are better suited for the spotlight, while others do their best work behind the scenes." She paused just long enough for Sophia to assume the conversation was moving in its usual direction. "Though I've always found it interesting how the people who talk the most about taking risks are often the ones with the most safety nets." The comment landed with surgical precision, causing a momentary silence that Lucy filled by offering more rice to Isabella. Sophia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, and Lucy caught Marcus giving his wife a questioning look. Diego, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, continued discussing his investment opportunity while Lucy served dessert and coffee, her movements as calm and efficient as ever. As the evening progressed, Lucy began implementing the first phase of what she had started thinking of as her master plan. It began with small things, barely noticeable disruptions that could easily be attributed to coincidence or oversight. When Sophia went to the bathroom, Lucy quietly moved her purse from the coffee table to a chair in the hallway, then watched with quiet satisfaction as her cousin spent several minutes searching for it, her composure cracking just slightly as she enlisted Marcus's help in the hunt. During coffee service, Lucy made sure to give Sophia a cup with a barely perceptible chip on the rim, the kind of minor imperfection that would bother someone as image-conscious as her cousin but wasn't significant enough to complain about without seeming petty. She also accidentally served Sophia's slice of Tres Leches cake on a dessert plate that was slightly smaller than everyone else's, creating a visual reminder of different treatment that would needle at someone who thrived on being the center of attention. The genius of these small acts lay in their ambiguity. Sophia couldn't be certain whether Lucy was being deliberately provocative or simply careless, and the uncertainty created exactly the kind of low-level anxiety that Lucy hoped would begin to eat away at her cousin's legendary composure. As she watched Sophia discreetly checking her appearance in the hallway mirror after the purse incident, Lucy felt a surge of satisfaction that was both foreign and intoxicating. The evening's most significant moment came during cleanup, when Lucy overheard Sophia talking quietly to Carmen in the kitchen while Lucy was supposedly focused on loading the dishwasher. Sophia's voice carried the concerned tone she used when positioning herself as the family's voice of reason, though Lucy detected an undercurrent of irritation that suggested her small disruptions were having their intended effect. "I'm just worried about the whole situation," Sophia was saying, apparently continuing a conversation that had started elsewhere. "Lucy seems different lately. More tense, maybe? And I can't help but wonder if the stress of caregiving is affecting her judgment. Marcus thinks we should consider having someone else help monitor the financial situation, just to make sure everything stays transparent." Carmen's response was murmured too quietly for Lucy to hear clearly, but Sophia's reply came through with crystal clarity. "It's not that I don't trust her, exactly. It's just that people can change when they're under pressure, and we have a responsibility to protect Tia Maria's interests. Sometimes the people closest to a situation are the last ones to recognize when they need help." Lucy continued loading dishes with steady hands, though her mind was racing with possibilities. Sophia's concerns about financial oversight revealed both paranoia and opportunity. If her cousin was already suspicious about money, it wouldn't take much to nurture that suspicion into something more destructive. The key would be creating situations that appeared to confirm Sophia's worst fears while maintaining Lucy's appearance of innocent competence. As the family began gathering their belongings and preparing to leave, Lucy hugged each person goodbye with the same warm sincerity she'd always shown. But when Sophia leaned in for their parting embrace, Lucy whispered just loud enough for her cousin to hear, "I'm so glad we had this talk about Mom's care. It's nice to know I can count on family to support the decisions I've been making." The statement was perfectly innocent on its surface, but Lucy had crafted it to imply a level of authority over Maria's affairs that she knew would bother Sophia. She stepped back with her usual gentle smile, watching as her cousin processed the comment with visible confusion. Sophia opened her mouth as if to ask for clarification, then seemed to think better of it, settling instead for a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. After the last guest departed, Lucy helped her mother settle into her evening routine, then retired to her own room with a cup of chamomile tea and the satisfaction of knowing she had planted the first seeds of doubt. As she sat at her desk, ostensibly working on a client's logo design, her mind was actually focused on planning the next phase of her strategy. The evening had confirmed what she'd suspected. Sophia's confidence was more fragile than it appeared, and the family dynamics that had protected her cousin's position were more unstable than anyone realized. Lucy opened a new document on her computer and began typing, creating what appeared to be notes for a freelance project but was actually a detailed timeline of her family's vulnerabilities. She had spent years observing their patterns, learning their secrets, and understanding the delicate balance of power that kept their dysfunction from completely destroying them. Now, for the first time, she was going to use that knowledge for her own purposes. The thought should have made her feel guilty, but instead, Lucy found herself humming softly as she worked, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the enthusiasm of someone finally pursuing a project that truly mattered to her. 3 weeks after the family dinner, Lucy's campaign of subtle psychological warfare had evolved from random acts of minor disruption into a carefully orchestrated symphony of manufactured chaos. She had spent her days maintaining the same appearance of devoted caregiving while secretly documenting every family member's routine, weakness, and secret shame with the methodical precision of a detective building a case. Her nights were devoted to research, using her graphic design skills to create fake social media profiles and her intimate knowledge of family history to craft increasingly sophisticated manipulations. The first major escalation came through Diego's weakness for validation and easy money. Lucy had created a fictional cryptocurrency investor named Meticulously who had supposedly been referred to Diego through mutual connections in the Phoenix business community. Using a combination of stock photos and carefully crafted backstory, Meticulously became exactly the kind of sophisticated investor who would appeal to Diego's desperate need to appear successful. Through encrypted messaging apps and a fake LinkedIn profile that took Lucy 3 days to make convincing, Michael began engaging Diego in conversations about potential investments that grew more elaborate with each exchange. Lucy's masterstroke was having Michael express specific interest in Diego's latest venture, while simultaneously raising concerns about family dynamics that might affect their potential partnership. The fictional investor mentioned having done background research that raised questions about whether Diego had adequate support from his family members and wondered if there were potential conflicts of interest with other family members who might have access to sensitive financial information. The comments were vague enough to avoid specific accusations while planting seeds of paranoia that Lucy knew would grow in Diego's alcohol-soaked imagination. The strategy worked better than Lucy had dared hope. Within a week, Diego was questioning whether Lucy's involvement in their mother's financial affairs might be creating complications for his business relationships. He began making pointed comments about the importance of transparency and suggesting that perhaps it was time for the family to consider bringing in professional management for their mother's care. Lucy listened to these concerns with the same patient attention she brought to everything else, while internally cataloging each comment as evidence of her plan's effectiveness. Sophia, meanwhile, was experiencing her own carefully crafted psychological pressure campaign. Lucy had begun using her graphic design skills to create anonymous letters that appeared to come from concerned neighbors, expressing worry about unusual activity at the Martinez house and wondering if Mrs. Martinez was receiving appropriate care. The letters were masterfully ambiguous, mentioning things like late-night disturbances and visitors at odd hours that could be interpreted in multiple ways but were designed to make Sophia question whether Lucy was adequately supervising their mother's care. The piece de resistance was a fake Yelp review that Lucy posted about a local home healthcare service, written from the perspective of someone whose family member had been taken advantage of by a live-in caregiver who seemed trustworthy but was secretly manipulating the situation for personal gain. The review was detailed enough to be believable while containing just enough specific details about financial irregularities and emotional manipulation to make Sophia's paranoid mind draw connections to Lucy's situation. Lucy's most audacious move involved exploiting her mother's actual medical appointments. She had begun arriving at Dr. Ramirez's office 30 minutes early for Maria's monthly checkups, using the time to establish herself as a concerned, overwhelmed caregiver who was struggling with the emotional burden of her responsibilities. She spoke to the reception staff about her worries regarding her mother's confusion about financial matters and her own concerns about family members who don't understand the complexity of the situation. The conversations were carefully crafted to appear like innocent venting from a stressed caregiver, but Lucy made sure to mention specific concerns about family members who questioned her judgment and seemed to think that caregiving was easier than it actually was. She also began asking detailed questions about her mother's legal rights and the process for establishing medical power of attorney, creating a paper trail that would later support whatever narrative she decided to construct. The brilliance of this approach was that it established Lucy as the responsible family member who was proactively seeking professional guidance, while simultaneously creating documentation that could be used to support claims about other family members' unrealistic expectations or interference. Dr. Ramirez began including notes in Maria's file about Lucy's dedication and the challenges she faced from family members who lacked understanding of the patient's needs. As October arrived with its promise of cooler weather and holiday gatherings, Lucy's manipulations began producing visible results. Sophia had started making unannounced visits to the house, arriving with flimsy excuses about being in the neighborhood while clearly conducting surveillance missions disguised as family concern. During these visits, she would engage Maria in conversations about her daily routine, her medication schedule, and her financial management, always phrased as caring interest but obviously designed to gather intelligence about Lucy's activities. Lucy welcomed these visits with the same gracious hospitality she showed everyone, while secretly delighting in Sophia's increasing desperation to find evidence of wrongdoing. She began leaving carefully planted evidence for Sophia to discover: medical bills that appeared to show irregularities in payment timing, prescription bottles that seemed to indicate medication changes that Sophia hadn't been informed about, and financial documents left casually on the kitchen counter that could be interpreted as either transparent record-keeping or suspicious activity, depending on Sophia's paranoid state of mind. The psychological pressure campaign reached its first major climax during Maria's birthday celebration in mid-October. Lucy had spent weeks planning what appeared to be a loving tribute to her mother's 63rd birthday, complete with a photo slideshow featuring decades of family memories, a catered meal from Maria's favorite restaurant, and personalized gifts that demonstrated thoughtful attention to her mother's interests and needs. The celebration was designed to showcase Lucy's devotion while simultaneously highlighting how little other family members contributed to Maria's daily care. But Lucy's real masterpiece was the guest list. She had invited not only immediate family members but also several of Maria's longtime friends, her primary care physician, and 2 neighbors who had known the family for decades. The expanded guest list created an audience for the performance Lucy had been planning for months, turning what should have been an intimate family gathering into a public showcase of family dysfunction. During the celebration, Lucy made sure to publicly thank each family member for their support while managing to highlight exactly how little support they actually provided. She thanked Diego for always being willing to help when he was available, thanked Sophia for offering advice from her busy schedule, and thanked other family members for understanding how important it was for someone to be here full-time. Each comment was phrased as genuine gratitude while actually emphasizing other family members' limited involvement in Maria's care. The evening's most devastating moment came when Lucy presented Maria with a memory book she had created, featuring photos and stories from throughout her mother's life. The book was a genuine work of art, demonstrating both Lucy's professional design skills and her intimate knowledge of family history. As Maria paged through the carefully crafted tribute, tears streaming down her face as she relived decades of memories, the contrast between Lucy's thoughtful gift and everyone else's generic store-bought presents became impossible to ignore. Sophia's contribution had been an expensive silk scarf that Maria would never wear, while Diego had given their mother a gift card to a restaurant she couldn't get to without help. The disparity in thoughtfulness was so stark that several guests commented on Lucy's obvious devotion, praising her for the sacrifice she was making to care for her mother. Each compliment was like a knife twisting in Sophia's increasingly desperate attempts to position herself as the family's responsible voice. But Lucy's coup de grace came at the end of the evening, when she made a seemingly impromptu speech about how grateful she was to have the opportunity to care for her mother during this difficult time. Standing in front of the assembled guests, with Maria beaming beside her and tears in her eyes, Lucy spoke movingly about the privilege of being able to give back to the woman who had given her so much. "I know some people might see caregiving as a burden," Lucy said, her voice carrying the perfect blend of humility and determination. "But I consider it the greatest honor of my life to be here for Mom when she needs me most. Family isn't just about showing up for the good times, it's about being present when things get difficult, when the work isn't glamorous, when nobody's watching to give you credit for doing the right thing." The speech was met with enthusiastic applause from the guests, who clearly saw Lucy as the embodiment of filial devotion. But Lucy was watching Sophia's face as she spoke, noting how her cousin's expression shifted from polite attention to barely concealed fury as the implications of Lucy's words sank in. By positioning herself as the selfless caregiver who asked for nothing in return, Lucy had effectively painted everyone else as fair-weather family members who contributed nothing but criticism. As the evening wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, Lucy noticed Sophia lingering near the kitchen, clearly hoping for a private conversation. When they finally found themselves alone, Sophia's mask of composed concern slipped just enough to reveal the anger simmering beneath. "That was quite a performance tonight," Sophia said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Very moving. I'm sure Mom appreciated all the attention." Lucy tilted her head with genuine curiosity, as if she couldn't imagine what Sophia might be implying. "I just wanted her to feel loved on her birthday. Family celebrations are so important, especially when someone is dealing with memory issues. These moments become even more precious when you realize how limited they might be." The response was perfectly crafted to sound like innocent explanation while actually highlighting Sophia's absence from most of Maria's daily life. Sophia's jaw tightened as she processed the subtle rebuke, her hands clenching and unclenching as she struggled to find a response that wouldn't make her sound petty or jealous. Of course, Sophia finally managed. It's wonderful that you have so much time to focus on these details. Not everyone has the luxury of such a flexible schedule. Lucy's smile never wavered, though she felt a surge of satisfaction at having provoked Sophia into revealing her resentment so clearly. I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to prioritize family. Not everyone gets the chance to be present for the people who matter most. I try never to take that privilege for granted. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with each woman delivering increasingly pointed comments disguised as family concern. But Lucy held every advantage in the exchange, armed with months of careful preparation and the moral high ground of being the family member who had actually sacrificed for Maria's care. By the time Sophia left that evening, Lucy could see that her cousin was practically vibrating with frustration and suspicion, exactly where Lucy wanted her. As Lucy cleaned up after the celebration, loading dishes and putting away decorations, she reflected on how perfectly the evening had unfolded. She had managed to publicly establish herself as the devoted daughter while simultaneously exposing the limitations of everyone else's contributions to Maria's care. More importantly, she had pushed Sophia to the edge of open hostility, creating the kind of family tension that would make Sophia's future accusations seem like jealous attacks rather than legitimate concerns. But Lucy's moment of triumph was interrupted by an unexpected discovery that would change everything. While collecting coffee cups from the living room, she found Sophia's phone, apparently forgotten in the rush to leave. As Lucy picked up the device, intending to call Sophia immediately, the screen lit up with a text message notification that made her blood run cold. The message was from Marcus, and the preview showed enough of the content to reveal that Sophia had been documenting Lucy's behavior far more systematically than Lucy had realized. The partial message mentioned evidence, lawyer, and intervention, suggesting that Sophia's suspicions had evolved into something far more dangerous than Lucy had anticipated. Standing in her mother's living room, holding her cousin's phone with trembling hands, Lucy realized that her campaign of psychological manipulation had succeeded better than she dared hope. But success had come with an unexpected price. Sophia was no longer just suspicious. She was actively building a case against Lucy, and she had resources and connections that could make her a formidable opponent in whatever legal battle might be coming. Lucy stared at Sophia's phone for nearly 10 minutes, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences while her hands remained perfectly steady. The device felt like a loaded weapon in her palms, containing information that could either destroy her carefully laid plans or provide the ammunition she needed to obliterate Sophia's credibility once and for all. After years of being underestimated and overlooked, Lucy found herself facing the first real test of her strategic thinking, and the realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. The smart move would have been to call Sophia immediately, return the phone with innocent apologies, and pretend she hadn't seen anything compromising. That's what the old Lucy would have done, the perpetually accommodating daughter who avoided conflict and maintained peace at any cost. But as she stood in the dimly lit living room, surrounded by the remnants of her mother's birthday celebration, Lucy made a decision that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of everything that came after. She unlocked Sophia's phone. The process was easier than it should have been. Sophia's password was her daughter Isabella's birthday, a piece of information Lucy had absorbed during countless family gatherings where Sophia documented every moment of her children's lives for social media posterity. The phone opened immediately, revealing a digital life that was as meticulously curated as Sophia's physical appearance. But Lucy wasn't interested in her cousin's carefully filtered Instagram posts or her extensive collection of motivational quotes on Pinterest. She navigated directly to the text messages, her heart pounding as she prepared to discover the full extent of Sophia's surveillance campaign. What she found exceeded her darkest expectations. The conversation thread with Marcus stretched back 3 months, revealing that Sophia's concerns about Lucy's caregiving had begun long before the overheard kitchen conversation that Lucy had thought was the beginning of her cousin's suspicions. The early messages were relatively benign, expressing general worry about Lucy's isolation and wondering if living with Maria was healthy for someone her age. But the tone had shifted dramatically in recent weeks, with Sophia's messages becoming increasingly specific about financial irregularities and behavioral changes she claimed to have observed. Lucy scrolled through dozens of messages, each one revealing how systematically Sophia had been building her case. There were photos of Lucy's car in the driveway at unusual times, screenshots of social media posts that Sophia interpreted as evidence of Lucy's unstable emotional state, and detailed notes about conversations with other family members that had been twisted to support Sophia's narrative of a caregiver whose judgment was compromised by stress and isolation. The most damaging discovery was a series of messages from the previous week, where Sophia described her plan to contact Dr. Ramirez directly to express concerns about Maria's care. Marcus had responded with the contact information for an elder abuse attorney, along with advice about how to document potential financial exploitation. The conversation included specific strategies for gathering evidence, including recommendations to secretly record conversations with Lucy and to request copies of Maria's financial records from her bank. But it was the final exchange that made Lucy's blood run cold, with a mixture of rage and crystalline clarity about what she needed to do next. Sophia had written, "I know Lucy seems devoted, but I can't shake the feeling that she's been planning this for years. Moving back home right when Mom started having memory issues, isolating her from other family members, positioning herself as the indispensable caregiver. It's textbook manipulation of a vulnerable adult. The lawyer says we need to act fast before she does any permanent damage." Marcus's response had been equally chilling: "Trust your instincts. People who appear selfless are often the most dangerous because no one suspects them of having ulterior motives. Document everything, and we'll move forward with the legal consultation next week. Better to be wrong about this than to let it continue if you're right." Lucy screenshot each message with methodical precision, forwarding them to an encrypted email account she created on the spot. As she worked, her mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating how this information could be weaponized against Sophia while simultaneously planning her defense against the legal threat that was now materializing faster than she had anticipated. The irony wasn't lost on her that Sophia's accusations of manipulation were being made by someone who was secretly documenting family interactions and consulting lawyers without informing the person she was investigating. After securing copies of the most damaging conversations, Lucy carefully deleted all evidence of her intrusion into Sophia's phone, cleared the browser history of her newly created email account, and reset the device to exactly the condition she had found it in. She then called Sophia's number from the house phone, adopting the concerned tone of someone who had just discovered a family member's forgotten belonging. "Sophia? It's Lucy. I found your phone in the living room after everyone left. You must have set it down during cleanup and forgotten about it in all the excitement." Lucy's voice carried exactly the right blend of helpfulness and mild worry about Sophia's forgetfulness. "I know how attached you are to that phone, so I wanted to call right away so you wouldn't panic when you realized it was missing." Sophia's relief was palpable even through the phone connection. "Oh my God, thank you so much for calling. I was just starting to worry when I couldn't find it. I must have been more distracted by the party than I realized." There was a pause before Sophia continued, her voice carrying a note of concern that Lucy now recognized as calculated performance. "I can come pick it up right now if that's okay. I know it's late, but I have some work calls scheduled for early tomorrow morning." Lucy smiled to herself, recognizing the transparent excuse to return to the house for another surveillance mission. "Of course. Mom's already asleep, but I'll be up for another hour or so finishing the cleanup. Just knock quietly when you get here so we don't wake her." 20 minutes later, Sophia arrived with the slightly frantic energy of someone whose carefully controlled world had been temporarily disrupted. She accepted the phone with effusive gratitude, immediately checking it for messages and missed calls while Lucy watched with new appreciation for her cousin's paranoid tendencies. Sophia's relief at finding the device apparently undisturbed was almost comical, given how thoroughly Lucy had invaded her digital privacy just an hour earlier. "Everything looks fine," Sophia murmured, more to herself than to Lucy. "I was worried I might have missed something important for work." She looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The party was lovely tonight, by the way. Mom looked so happy with all the attention. You really went above and beyond with the planning." Lucy accepted the compliment with her usual gracious humility, though she was now hearing every word through the filter of Sophia's secret agenda. "It was my pleasure." These family celebrations mean so much to her, especially now. I just want to make sure she feels loved and supported by everyone." As Sophia prepared to leave, she paused at the front door with the same calculated casualness she had used during previous fishing expeditions. "You know, Lucy, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, about how demanding caregiving can be. Have you given any thought to what we discussed about getting some additional support? Maybe someone who could help with the more clinical aspects of mom's care?" The question was loaded with implications that Lucy now understood completely. Sophia wasn't offering help, she was laying groundwork for her legal case by establishing that Lucy had been advised to seek professional assistance and had refused. Lucy's response needed to be equally strategic, appearing cooperative while actually strengthening her position. "I appreciate your concern, Sophia. I've actually been in close contact with Dr. Ramirez about Mom's care plan, and he's been very supportive of our current arrangement. He's mentioned several times how well Mom is doing at home, compared to patients who've been moved to institutional care. But I'm always open to exploring options that would benefit Mom's health and well-being." The response was masterfully crafted to sound collaborative while actually establishing that Lucy's caregiving approach had professional medical endorsement. Sophia's expression tightened almost imperceptibly as she processed this information, clearly recognizing that Lucy's supposed isolation from professional oversight wasn't as complete as Sophia had assumed. "That's wonderful that Dr. Ramirez is so involved," Sophia replied, her voice carefully neutral. "I'd love to hear his perspective on Mom's progress sometime. Maybe I could come with you to her next appointment? I know how much these medical visits can benefit from having multiple family members present to ask questions and provide input." Lucy's smile widened with genuine warmth, though her eyes remained calculating. "What a thoughtful idea! I know Mom would appreciate having more family support during medical appointments. Her next visit is scheduled for next Thursday at 10 a.m. I'll mention to Dr. Ramirez that you're interested in being more involved in her care coordination." The exchange was a perfect example of how both women had learned to weaponize politeness, with each offer of cooperation actually serving as a strategic move in their escalating psychological warfare. Sophia had hoped to gain access to medical information that might support her case against Lucy, while Lucy was planning to use Sophia's presence at the appointment to demonstrate to Dr. Ramirez exactly what kind of family interference she had been dealing with as a devoted caregiver. After Sophia left, Lucy sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea and her laptop, feeling more energized than she had in years. The discovery of Sophia's legal maneuvering had been shocking, but it had also clarified exactly what kind of battle she was fighting and what weapons she would need to win it. For the first time since beginning her campaign of revenge, Lucy felt like she was operating from a position of strength rather than simply reacting to years of accumulated resentment. She opened a new document and began creating what she privately called the Sophia File, a comprehensive dossier that would systematically dismantle her cousin's credibility while simultaneously strengthening Lucy's position as the devoted daughter who had been subjected to harassment and false accusations by jealous family members. The file would include the screenshots from Sophia's phone, documentation of Lucy's exemplary caregiving record, and a carefully constructed timeline that would make Sophia's accusations appear to be the product of paranoia and family jealousy rather than legitimate concern. But Lucy's masterpiece would be the psychological profile she was developing of Sophia's motivations and methods. Using her intimate knowledge of family dynamics and her newfound understanding of Sophia's surveillance techniques, Lucy began crafting a narrative that would explain Sophia's behavior as the desperate actions of someone whose position as the family's golden child was being threatened by Lucy's genuine devotion to their mother. The profile was devastating in its accuracy and insight. Lucy documented Sophia's history of needing to be the center of family attention, her pattern of offering advice without practical support, and her tendency to create drama when she felt her authority was being questioned. She included specific examples of Sophia's manipulative behavior over the years, from claiming credit for family events she hadn't organized to offering unsolicited advice about family members' personal decisions while contributing nothing to solve actual problems. Most importantly, Lucy was building a case that Sophia's recent accusations represented a pattern of behavior rather than isolated incidents of legitimate concern. By establishing Sophia's history of jealousy and manipulation, Lucy could position her cousin's legal threats as the escalation of a personal vendetta rather than genuine worry about elder abuse. As Lucy worked through the night, cross-referencing dates and organizing evidence with the same methodical attention she brought to her most complex design projects, she realized that Sophia's aggressive tactics had actually provided Lucy with the perfect opportunity to achieve everything she had been planning. By forcing the conflict into the open and involving legal authorities, Sophia had unwittingly created a battlefield where Lucy's years of documentation and genuine caregiving record would be decisive advantages. The realization filled Lucy with a sense of anticipation that was both thrilling and terrifying. Tomorrow would begin the final phase of her campaign, and for the first time in her life, Lucy Martinez was confident that she held all the winning cards. The week following Sophia's phone revelation passed with the deceptive calm of a gathering storm. Lucy maintained her usual routine of caring for Maria, managing the household, and working on her design projects, but beneath the surface she was orchestrating the most sophisticated psychological operation of her life. Every interaction with family members became an opportunity to gather intelligence and plant seeds that would bloom into devastating consequences when Sophia finally made her move. Lucy's first strategic decision was to accelerate her timeline. Rather than allowing Sophia to build her case at a leisurely pace, Lucy began creating situations that would force her cousin to reveal her accusations prematurely, before Sophia had gathered enough evidence to make them credible. The key was to appear increasingly competent and devoted while simultaneously making Sophia seem paranoid and vindictive to anyone who might be watching. The campaign began with Dr. Ramirez's office, where Lucy arrived for Maria's Thursday appointment 30 minutes early, as had become her custom. But this time, she came prepared with a folder of documents that painted a picture of exemplary caregiving, detailed medication logs she had been keeping for months, nutritional charts tracking Maria's dietary needs, and a comprehensive daily schedule that demonstrated the level of professional attention Lucy had been providing. She also brought printed emails from Maria's previous doctors, praising the quality of care Maria was receiving at home. When Sophia arrived precisely on time, clearly expecting to catch Lucy off guard with her surprise participation in the appointment, she found instead a scene that immediately put her at a disadvantage. Lucy was sitting calmly in the waiting room, engaged in friendly conversation with two other caregivers who were praising her dedication and sharing their own challenges with family members who didn't understand how hard this job really was. The receptionist greeted Sophia politely but without the warmth she showed Lucy, and the nurse who called them back addressed Lucy as Mrs. Martinez and Sophia as the cousin, establishing a clear hierarchy that Sophia hadn't anticipated. During the appointment itself, Lucy's preparation became even more evident. When Dr. Ramirez asked about Maria's progress, Lucy produced her meticulously maintained charts and logs, demonstrating not only that Maria was thriving under her care but that Lucy was providing a level of documentation that many professional caregivers didn't match. The doctor's obvious approval and appreciation for Lucy's thoroughness created a stark contrast with Sophia's awkward attempts to ask probing questions about Maria's financial management and decision-making capacity. Sophia's inquiries about Maria's competency and whether there were safeguards in place to protect her interests fell flat in the face of Dr. Ramirez's enthusiastic praise for Lucy's caregiving approach. When Sophia suggested that Maria might benefit from additional oversight of her daily care, the doctor actually frowned, explaining that stability and consistent caregiving were crucial for dementia patients, and that Maria was incredibly fortunate to have such a dedicated family member providing expert-level care at home. Lucy watched Sophia's frustration build throughout the appointment, noting how her cousin's carefully prepared questions began to sound increasingly suspicious and inappropriate in the context of Dr. Ramirez's obvious confidence in Lucy's abilities. By the time they left the office, Sophia's face was tight with barely controlled anger, while Lucy maintained her usual serene composure, thanking Sophia for taking time from her busy schedule to support Mom's medical care. The real masterstroke came that evening, when Lucy called Sophia to follow up on the appointment. The conversation was ostensibly about coordinating future medical visits, but Lucy's actual purpose was to provoke Sophia into revealing more of her agenda while creating a recorded conversation that would document Sophia's increasingly erratic behavior. "I wanted to thank you again for coming with us today," Lucy began, her voice warm with apparent gratitude. "It means so much to Mom to know that the whole family is invested in her health and well-being." Dr. Ramirez seemed really impressed with how well-informed you are about her condition. The comment was expertly crafted to sound like praise while actually highlighting how unprepared Sophia had been for the appointment. Sophia's response was tighter than usual, her frustration bleeding through her attempt to maintain diplomatic relations. I just want to make sure Mom is getting the best possible care, Sophia replied, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. It's important for family members to stay involved and ask the right questions. Sometimes the people closest to a situation can miss things that outside observers might notice. Lucy allowed a note of confusion to enter her voice, as if she couldn't imagine what Sophia might be implying. That's such a thoughtful perspective. I'm always grateful for input from family members who want to help. Is there something specific you think I should be doing differently? I know caregiving can seem straightforward from the outside, but there are so many details that aren't obvious unless you're handling them every day. The response was designed to sound like innocent receptiveness while actually challenging Sophia to specify her concerns or admit that she was operating from a position of ignorance about the actual demands of caregiving. Sophia's pause before responding told Lucy that her cousin was struggling to articulate her suspicions without sounding petty or unfounded. It's not that you're doing anything wrong, Sophia finally said, though her tone suggested otherwise. It's just that caregiving can be incredibly isolating, and sometimes people in that situation can develop perspectives that might not be entirely objective. I've been reading about caregiver stress and how it can affect judgment and decision-making. Lucy felt a surge of triumph at having provoked Sophia into revealing her strategy so clearly. The comment about perspectives that might not be entirely objective was obviously setting up future arguments about Lucy's mental state, while the reference to caregiver stress was clearly drawn from whatever research Sophia had been doing to support her legal case. How thoughtful of you to research that, Lucy responded, allowing genuine warmth to color her voice. It's true that caregiving can be challenging, which is why I've been so grateful for Dr. Ramirez's support and guidance. He's actually mentioned several times how important it is for caregivers to have professional oversight and regular check-ins to prevent exactly the kind of problems you're talking about. I feel very fortunate to have that kind of professional relationship. Again, Lucy's response sounded appreciative while actually undermining Sophia's entire line of attack. By establishing that her caregiving approach already included professional oversight and regular evaluation, Lucy was making it much harder for Sophia to argue that Lucy was operating in dangerous isolation or making decisions without appropriate guidance. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes, with Sophia making increasingly desperate attempts to find openings for her concerns while Lucy deflected each probe with apparent innocence and cooperative enthusiasm. By the end of the call, Sophia sounded exhausted and frustrated, while Lucy maintained her usual patient cheerfulness, offering to send Sophia copies of the medical documentation she'd been maintaining so the whole family could stay informed about Mom's progress. 2 days later, Lucy implemented the second phase of her escalation strategy by creating a crisis that would test Sophia's priorities and reveal the self-serving nature of her supposed concern for Maria's welfare. Using her knowledge of Diego's financial desperation and Sophia's paranoid surveillance, Lucy orchestrated a situation that would force both cousins to choose between genuine family support and their own agendas. The crisis began with a carefully timed phone call to Diego, ostensibly seeking his advice about a complicated situation that had arisen regarding their mother's care. Lucy explained that Maria had been having more frequent episodes of confusion and that Dr. Ramirez had recommended considering day program services that would provide additional stimulation and social interaction. The programs were expensive and would require either insurance negotiations or significant out-of-pocket expenses that Lucy couldn't cover on her own. I hate to ask for help, Lucy said, her voice carrying perfectly calibrated notes of reluctance and worry. But if we're going to keep Mom at home, we need to make sure she's getting the best possible care. The day program would be incredible for her, but it's about $800 a month that I just don't have in my budget. I was hoping maybe the family could help split the cost, since it would really improve her quality of life. Diego's response was exactly what Lucy had expected, immediate enthusiasm about the idea followed by creative explanations for why he couldn't contribute financially. His cryptocurrency venture was at a crucial juncture that required all his available capital, but he was absolutely supportive of the program and thought it was exactly what Mom needed. He suggested that Lucy contact Sophia, since she's always talking about wanting to help more with Mom's care. Lucy's call to Sophia an hour later was a masterpiece of strategic manipulation. She presented the same request for financial assistance, but she framed it as an opportunity for Sophia to demonstrate the genuine concern she'd been expressing about Maria's care. The conversation was also a test of whether Sophia's supposed worry about Maria's well-being would translate into actual financial support for improving that care. "I know you've been concerned about making sure Mom gets the best possible care," Lucy said, her tone suggesting complete confidence in Sophia's willingness to help. This day program would address a lot of the socialization issues that can be challenging for dementia patients who spend most of their time at home. Dr. Ramirez thinks it would be perfect for her current stage of cognitive function. Sophia's response revealed everything Lucy needed to know about her cousin's true priorities. Rather than expressing enthusiasm about improving Maria's care, Sophia immediately began asking detailed questions about the program's oversight, the qualifications of the staff, and whether the facility had appropriate safeguards for vulnerable adults. Her questions had nothing to do with Maria's well-being and everything to do with gathering information that might support her case about Lucy's judgment and decision-making. When Lucy mentioned the cost and asked if Sophia might be willing to help cover the expenses, Sophia's pause was so long that Lucy wondered if the call had been disconnected. When Sophia finally responded, her answer was a masterclass in appearing helpful while actually refusing to provide any real assistance. "That's a significant expense," Sophia said carefully. "I think we need to research this thoroughly before making any commitments. Maybe we should get second opinions from other medical professionals, and definitely look into what insurance might cover. There might be more cost-effective alternatives that would provide similar benefits." The response was everything Lucy had hoped for and more. Sophia was essentially refusing to support improved care for Maria while disguising her refusal as prudent caution. Even better, Sophia was suggesting additional research and second opinions that would delay any actual improvements to Maria's life while Sophia continued building her case against Lucy. Lucy's response was perfectly calibrated to highlight the contrast between Sophia's expressed concerns and her actual willingness to help. "Of course, I understand wanting to be thorough. I just worry about delaying too long, since Dr. Ramirez emphasized how important it is to introduce these programs while Mom's still adaptable to new routines. But you're right that we should explore all the options." The conversation ended with Sophia promising to look into alternatives while Lucy agreed to hold off on any decisions until the family could coordinate their approach. But Lucy had already achieved her real objective, demonstrating that Sophia's concern for Maria was purely theoretical and that her priority was gathering intelligence for her legal case rather than improving Maria's actual care. That evening, Lucy began documenting the day's conversations in what she was calling her family response file. The file would eventually serve as devastating evidence of how her relatives had reacted when given opportunities to provide genuine support for Maria's care versus pursuing their own agendas. Diego's immediate financial excuses and Sophia's investigative questions rather than helpful enthusiasm would create a powerful narrative about who was actually prioritizing Maria's well-being. As Lucy worked on her documentation, she felt the familiar satisfaction of knowing that her strategy was working perfectly. Every conversation, every interaction, every seemingly innocent request for help was building toward a moment of revelation that would expose her family's true nature to the world. Sophia's legal threats had accelerated Lucy's timeline, but they had also provided the perfect framework for demonstrating who was really protecting Maria's interests. The irony was delicious. In trying to build a case against Lucy, Sophia was actually creating the evidence that would destroy her own credibility and reveal the Martinez family's dysfunction to anyone who cared to look closely enough. The crisis Lucy hadn't anticipated arrived on a gray November morning when her mother suffered what appeared to be a minor heart episode that required emergency room treatment. Lucy's first instinct was genuine panic. Despite all her strategic maneuvering and psychological warfare, her love for Maria remained real and uncomplicated. As she followed the ambulance to Phoenix General Hospital, her mind raced between terror about her mother's health and the cold calculation of how this medical emergency would affect her carefully orchestrated plans. The emergency room became an unexpected battlefield where Lucy's months of preparation collided with the unpredictable chaos of a genuine family crisis. Sophia arrived within an hour of Lucy's panicked phone call, followed by Diego and several other family members who had somehow materialized despite their usual absence from daily caregiving responsibilities. Suddenly, the hospital waiting room was filled with Martinez relatives expressing dramatic concern and offering assistance that had been nowhere to be found during the months of routine care that actually mattered. Lucy watched this performance with fascination and growing rage, noting how family members who couldn't be bothered to help with medication schedules or doctor's appointments suddenly became passionate advocates for Maria's well-being when the situation involved dramatic medical intervention and an audience of healthcare professionals. Sophia, in particular, seemed to transform into a different person entirely, speaking with authority about Maria's medical history and care needs while positioning herself as the primary family contact for the medical team. "I'm Maria's healthcare proxy," Sophia announced to Dr. Chen, the emergency room physician, presenting a document that Lucy had never seen before. "I need to understand exactly what happened and what treatment options we're considering. I've been very concerned about the level of care she's been receiving at home, and I want to make sure this incident gets the thorough evaluation it deserves." Lucy felt the ground shift beneath her feet as she realized that Sophia's legal preparation had been far more comprehensive than she had discovered through the phone surveillance. The healthcare proxy document appeared to be legitimate, bearing Maria's signature and recent dates that suggested it had been executed during one of Sophia's casual visits when Lucy had been running errands or attending to other responsibilities. The implications were staggering. Sophia had been secretly maneuvering to gain legal authority over Maria's medical decisions while publicly expressing confidence in Lucy's caregiving abilities. Dr. Chen accepted Sophia's authority without question, directing his explanations about Maria's condition and treatment options to Sophia while treating Lucy as a secondary family member whose input was appreciated but not decisive. The role reversal was devastating, transforming Lucy from primary caregiver to concerned relative in the span of a single conversation. Sophia's preparation had been masterful, creating a legal framework that positioned her as the responsible family member while making Lucy appear to be someone whose judgment might be questioned by medical professionals. As Maria was admitted for observation and further testing, Sophia began implementing what was clearly a predetermined strategy for taking control of the situation. She requested private conferences with the attending physician, asking detailed questions about Maria's cognitive capacity and whether there were signs of neglect or inappropriate care in her medical presentation. She also began gathering contact information from the nursing staff, explaining that she needed to ensure proper communication about Maria's condition since there had been some family concerns about information sharing. Lucy found herself relegated to the sidelines of decisions about her mother's care, watching helplessly as Sophia orchestrated meetings with social workers and case managers that Lucy wasn't invited to attend. When she tried to provide the detailed medical records she had been maintaining, Sophia intercepted them with polite appreciation, explaining to the hospital staff that she would review these with the medical team to ensure accuracy and completeness. The message was clear. Sophia was positioning herself as the filter through which all information about Maria's care would flow, while subtly suggesting that Lucy's records might be unreliable or incomplete. Birthday was approaching, and this time, the planning involved genuine collaboration rather than strategic manipulation designed to expose everyone's inadequacies. The transformation in family dynamics had been gradual but profound. Sophia now visited twice a week, bringing groceries and helping with household tasks while engaging Maria in conversations about family history and future plans. Diego had maintained his commitment to financial counseling and had been sober from gambling for 4 months, gradually rebuilding trust through consistent small actions rather than dramatic promises. Most importantly, Lucy had learned to accept help and share responsibilities without interpreting every gesture as evidence of criticism or inadequacy. "I want this birthday to be different," Maria had announced the previous week, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had emerged as her cognitive condition stabilized with reduced family stress. "I want it to be a celebration of who we've become as a family, not just a marking of time passing. I want everyone to understand how proud I am of the work you've all done to heal the relationships that matter most." The party planning had become a collaborative effort that showcased how much everyone had changed. Sophia contributed her organizational skills and event coordination expertise, but she did so in partnership with Lucy rather than competition. Diego offered to handle music and entertainment, demonstrating reliability that he was still earning back day by day. Lucy maintained her role as primary coordinator while accepting input and assistance that made the celebration richer rather than threatening her position as the devoted daughter. The guest list reflected the family's new commitment to authenticity. Rather than inviting people to impress or creating an audience for family drama, they had chosen only the individuals who had supported them through difficult times and genuinely cared about Maria's well-being. Dr. Ramirez and his wife would attend, along with neighbors who had become real friends rather than strategic allies, and family members who had earned their places through consistent love rather than obligation. 2 days before the party, Lucy received a phone call that would test everything the family had learned about communication and mutual support. Dr. Ramirez called to discuss Maria's latest test results, which showed some progression in her cognitive decline that would require adjustments to her care plan and medication regimen. The changes aren't dramatic, Dr. Ramirez explained, but they do suggest that Maria will need additional support in the coming months. This might be a good time to consider some of the day program options we've discussed, both for Maria's social stimulation and to provide Lucy with more respite from caregiving responsibilities. Lucy's first instinct was to handle the news independently, protecting her family from worry while maintaining her role as the primary caregiver who managed all medical concerns. But she caught herself before falling back into old patterns of secrecy and control. Instead, she asked Dr. Ramirez if they could schedule a family conference that would include Sofia and Diego, ensuring that everyone understood Maria's changing needs and could contribute to developing appropriate support strategies. The family meeting took place in Dr. Ramirez's office 3 days after Maria's birthday celebration, with all 4 family members present to discuss care planning and future needs. The conversation was honest and collaborative, with each person contributing their perspectives and concerns without hidden agendas or strategic maneuvering. Sofia's response to the medical news demonstrated how much she had changed since the early days of her legal consultation and secret surveillance. Rather than using Maria's declining condition as evidence that Lucy's caregiving was inadequate, Sofia immediately began researching day programs and respite care options that would complement Lucy's efforts rather than replace them. "I want to understand what additional support would look like," Sofia said, "and I want to make sure we're all contributing in ways that actually help rather than creating more stress. Lucy, what kind of assistance would be most valuable to you, and how can Diego and I make sure we're providing real support rather than just appearing to help?" Diego's contribution was equally meaningful in its maturity and honesty. He acknowledged that his financial situation limited his ability to contribute money for additional care services, but he offered to provide practical assistance with transportation, household maintenance, and companionship that would allow Lucy more flexibility in her caregiving schedule. "I know I can't make up for the years when I wasn't helpful," Diego said, "but I want to earn my place as someone you can count on for the practical stuff that makes caregiving easier. I may not be able to pay for professional services, but I can be the reliable family member who shows up when you need help with mom's appointments or just need a break." The care plan that emerged from their discussions represented everything Lucy had hoped for during the months when she had been plotting revenge against her family's selfishness and indifference. Sofia committed to managing insurance coordination and researching care options, using her professional skills in ways that supported Lucy's efforts rather than undermining them. Diego would provide transportation and companionship services on a regular schedule, creating predictable respite that Lucy could depend on for planning and personal time. Most importantly, Maria remained the central decision-maker in her own care planning, with family members supporting her choices rather than making decisions about her life without her input. The cognitive changes Dr. Ramirez had identified didn't diminish Maria's ability to express preferences about her living situation, social activities, and family relationships. "I want to stay in my home as long as possible," Maria said clearly, "but I also want to make sure Lucy has the support she needs to maintain her own life and relationships while caring for me. The day program sounds wonderful for meeting new people and staying active, and I like knowing that Sofia and Diego will be more involved in helping with practical matters." 3 months later, as Lucy sat in the living room watching Maria enjoy her afternoon at the community day program while Sofia handled a phone call with the insurance company and Diego worked in the garden outside, she reflected on how completely her life had transformed since the days when she had been documenting psychological profiles and planning elaborate schemes of revenge. The sophisticated revenge plot that had consumed her thoughts and energy for months seemed like something from another person's life. The Lucy who had created fictional cryptocurrency investors to manipulate Diego's paranoia, or who had planted anonymous letters to increase Sofia's suspicions, felt like a character in a story rather than her actual past self. The satisfaction she had anticipated from exposing her family's dysfunction had been replaced by something far more meaningful, the deep contentment of being genuinely known and appreciated for who she actually was rather than the role she had been performing. The family dinners that had once been stages for psychological warfare had become genuine celebrations of their shared life and mutual support. Sophia's children now spent weekends at the house, learning traditional recipes from Maria and developing relationships with their grandmother that enriched everyone's experience. Diego's newfound reliability had allowed Lucy to pursue freelance design projects that challenged her professionally while maintaining her caregiving responsibilities. Most profoundly, Lucy's relationship with Maria had evolved into something deeper and more honest than the protective caretaking that had characterized their early caregiving years. Maria's cognitive changes had been gradual and manageable, partly because the family stress that had exacerbated her confusion had been replaced by stable, loving support that allowed her to function at her highest possible level. "Mija," Maria said one evening as Lucy helped her prepare for bed, "I want you to know something important. I know you sacrificed a lot to take care of me these past few years, and I know there were times when you felt unappreciated and taken for granted by the family. But I also want you to know that watching you grow into the strong, honest woman you've become has been one of the greatest privileges of my life." Lucy felt tears building as she listened to her mother's words, understanding that Maria was offering forgiveness for the months of manipulation and strategic plotting that could have destroyed their family relationships permanently. "I'm sorry it took me so long to learn how to ask for what I needed instead of trying to prove I didn't need anything," Lucy replied. "I'm sorry I thought hurting other people would somehow heal my own pain." "We all learn things about ourselves that we needed to learn," Maria said gently. Sophia learned that caring for family doesn't mean controlling family. Diego learned that love requires responsibility, not just good intentions. And you learned that your worth doesn't depend on being perfect or proving other people are flawed. Those were hard lessons, but we're all better people for having learned them. As Lucy tucked her mother into bed and turned off the lights, she felt a profound sense of peace that had nothing to do with strategic victory or psychological manipulation. The family she had tried to destroy through revenge had been reborn through honesty, mutual support, and the kind of love that allowed people to be imperfect while still being cherished. Standing in the hallway outside her mother's room, Lucy could hear Sophia finishing her insurance call downstairs and Diego closing up the garden tools for the evening. Tomorrow would bring new caregiving challenges and family coordination, but she would face them as part of a team rather than as a lone warrior fighting against relatives who didn't understand or appreciate her sacrifices. The revenge she had plotted for months had ultimately succeeded, but not in the way she had intended. Instead of exposing her family's worst qualities, her campaign of psychological manipulation had forced everyone to confront their deepest fears and insecurities, leading to healing rather than destruction. The shocking revelation that had left her family speechless wasn't the dramatic unveiling of their selfishness and cruelty, but the discovery that beneath all their dysfunction and resentment, they genuinely loved each other enough to do the difficult work of becoming better people. In the end, Lucy Martinez had achieved the perfect revenge. She had transformed her family into the people she had always hoped they could be, and in the process, she had become someone worthy of the love and appreciation she had always craved. The truth about what her family didn't know about her hadn't left them speechless with shock at her calculating nature, but with gratitude for the strength and dedication that had ultimately saved them all from the destruction their own worst impulses might have caused. As Lucy settled into her own bed that night, she felt genuinely excited about what tomorrow might bring, but this time the anticipation came from hope rather than revenge, from love rather than anger, and from the deep satisfaction of knowing that the family she had fought so hard to preserve had finally become worth all the effort she had invested in keeping them together.